Renee, in the city you came from, was the city attorney's office in-house or was it a firm?
It was,
It was a firm.
and like you, the one that was contracted to us also had
Like, other-
3 or 4 or 5 other cities.
Yeah.
that He also
Yeah.
worked for.
What did you do to bring a party?
I invited them because we're doing the code review project.
Just joking.
Yeah. It's a pretty good showing.
It is. It's good. Need the insights.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we did. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. It's 6 p.m., January 29th now, 2024. And the City Council work session will now come to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Renee, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Frank Bankert,
I am present.
Councilmember Lloyd Roberts.
Here.
Councilmember Kim Shaw Elliott,
Present.
Mayor Dave Gaddis,
Here.
City Manager Kyle Reefler,
Here.
City Attorney Randy Moore.
Present.
Thank you very much. We're going to move right over to agenda item number 1, which is introduction to codes review project. And we have guest Luis Serna. Did I say that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
All right, I don't know how to get the share screen started. Is that the Zoom?
Make it big.
All right.
Yep. There.
All right, thank you. All right, thanks, everyone. Louis Serna with Calvin Giordano and Associates. And I've noticed it's been typing my words, and I don't know if you can hear the echo a little bit, but I'll try to turn down my volume to get rid of that. But just wanted to do a quick introduction of this project that we're working on, updating your land development code. So we're going to do a quick introduction of the project, take your input and your questions, and discuss next steps in the process. And of course, understand this will not be your only opportunity for input. This will be a process, and I'll explain that through the next steps. But just really to get your mind thinking of what problems that you've seen or issues you'd like addressed in the land development code update. The purpose of updating your land development code, these are just some of the purposes: for consistency with your comprehensive plan. So we'll be checking for that. Consistency with countywide rules, consistency with Florida statutes, for internal clarity and consistency, to reflect best practices, and to reflect your local priorities. So really, that's where we're going to be looking for your input and input from the public on local priorities. Just some things to think about when updating your land development code. What are common complaints that you hear? And as council members, and we look to staff as well, what are the complaints that you're commonly hear that can be addressed through land development code update? What are variance requests that you get that are common that could perhaps be addressed through a land development code rewrite? What are unwritten rules and interpretations? And these are often things that are not clear in the code, but somebody, staff member usually says this is what it means, and rather than updating the code, it just ends up as being a memo many times. But what we really want to do is incorporate all those in the land development code. And then no logical order, just trying to order the code in a way that a user, the public usually who doesn't use it on a daily basis, can find what they're looking for easily. Things like, where can I put a pool? What are my setbacks? Things like that. So it's good to include somebody with an outside perspective like our firm in the process, because we sort of bring a fresh look and based on our experience reviewing other codes. But it's also good to have the local input and your experience as well. So what I'd like to do at this point is really just touch on what's in your land development code in case you're not familiar with it. Or just a reminder, your code is in subpart B of your code of ordinances. However, we can go outside of that to the entire code of ordinances, but for purposes of tonight's meeting and what we'll be focusing primarily on, we'll be focusing on subpart B. I know there are things like swimming pools and docks that are not in subpart B that probably should be. But if there are things like that, we can certainly put them in the land development code or update them as a part of the other portion of the code of ordinances. So chapter 70 is your concurrency management section. Like a lot of communities in Pinellas County, you're a built out town, and you probably don't use this a lot. It primarily affects larger developments that would have large public impacts. But again, it's worth looking at, and I'm not sure if you've experienced any problems or need to, but this is what's included in that section. I did note some things that are out of date and not consistent with the county plans, the county's concurrency requirements that would probably work to your advantage and probably should be updated. So would recommend that you look at that. You do have a parks level of service standard that is no longer required by the state, but it's up to you if you want to consider that. And with that, I'll pause on this chapter if you have any questions on concurrency or questions or comments.
Council? No? Okay, please proceed.
Floodplain management. This chapter is needs to be consistent with state requirements. They have a state model ordinance. Really what we'll be doing is making sure that it's consistent with the model ordinance. We don't want to depart from that to get out of state compliance. So don't know if you've had any issues with that, but I'll pause on this chapter as well if you have any comments or questions on this chapter.
Yes, Mr. Banker.
When you say state requirements, are we considering the FEMA requirements too? I mean, I know FEMA doesn't issue permits or approve plans, but they do have set standards to keep the NFIP.
Yeah, the state requirements incorporate FEMA's requirements as well. The state wants all the communities in Florida to have consistent regulations. And yes, they do need to be consistent with FEMA.
Other questions?
All right. Chapter 78 is a very.
Excuse me, one second, sir.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Kelly. We actually, because it's a public meeting and it's broadcasted, you're going to have to step up to the microphone.
My name is Mike Kelly, 2740 Hibiscus Drive. Mr. Cerner, why do they call it Land Development Code? We don't call it the Land Development Code. Is that just a broad? We gonna change it to Land Development Code?
Well, actually, that subpart B is titled Land Development Code in your Code of Ordinances. And typically the Land Development Code just deals with everything dealing with land development, and primarily zoning, you'll see, is probably the largest section. So we're not proposing changing the title or anything like that. It's just, what's currently known as your land development code. Does that answer that? Okay. Chapter 78 entitled planning, like I said, it's a very short chapter. It probably could be incorporated elsewhere in your code. This primarily just says what your local planning agency is. But that's it. It's very short. So any questions or comments? Yeah, like I said, it's a very short chapter. Maybe we can incorporate it in elsewhere in the code. Satellite antennas, you have a chapter on that. I didn't see anything of note in that, but I'm not sure if you've had any issues. So I'll just pause on that. For comments or questions?
Does that include towers?
No, that's a different chapter.
Okay.
All right. Signs, my understanding is this council is, or the town is in the process or has recently updated this section to be consistent with federal requirements. So I don't anticipate that we're going to be, we don't want to recreate that effort or reinvent the wheel, but it is a part of your land development code. It is a chapter. So if you have any questions on that.
Are you at least gonna take a gander at it, just kind of scan through and see if our city attorney did his job correctly?
I'm sure the city attorney did a great job, but yeah, we will look at it. Yeah, for any suggestions. But yeah, we definitely don't want to touch the changes made for legal purposes. And again, probably not, since you don't have a commercial area, probably won't get into anything controversial, but yeah, it's a hot button topic many times.
And I just,
We will look at it.
and I just wish to add more broadly as, this is what Mr. Serna is proposing is entirely a collaborative process between, a city's legal department and the planners to harmonize those. And his point at the outset is well taken in stating that it helps to have a fresh set of eyes, not just of somebody who's not of the community, but there's sort of, when you talk about writing land development codes, and when I spoke about this with Kyle, there's sort of a Venn diagram of a planner and a lawyer looking at these. I'm looking at the legal things without often the complete vision of what is the planning outfall and the land development outfall of that. And so bringing those both perspectives will help us to better harmonize the code going forward, as I might be more sensitive to, let's say, recent changes in Florida statutes, and he with more, growth management and things like that.
All right. Yes.
That's actually very good to hear. So I'm glad we're getting input from both sides. And one thing to perhaps keep in mind is that the new sign ordinance, at least as proposed, is rather prescriptive and is might benefit from some readability, just in terms of people being able to find something quickly and be able to kind of have I know citizens don't have to be lawyers to be able to present something, but at least have a good understanding of how they can find things and be reassured of what the language actually says.
Mr. Serna, just for your benefit, as we talk about the sign code, where it stands in this community is there was a draft provided to planning and zoning. The council looked at it once, but nothing has gone on first and second reading.
Okay.
There's just a draft, and we can confer as this process moves forward.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be working closely with the attorney on that. And yeah, your point about it being readable, it's good. We review a lot of sign codes, and there's several model codes and things like that. So yeah, we'll definitely look at it with that lens. So.
Could you look at the one that's in abeyance right now?
But for the
There's one-
towns,
There's one that's been put on, well, I don't know if the correct words, abeyance or whatever, but it's not being enforced, but it's still in our muni code.
You're saying just looking at the code as it presently is, as opposed to how it may, as opposed to the proposed amendment.
okay, yeah, definitely. We'll look at that. All right, anything else?
I don't think so.
All right, your subdivision chapter, very long. I won't walk through all the sections. I don't imagine you get very large subdivisions here, but you could. So, I mean, we're definitely going to look at it closely. So you may not have had a lot of experience with the sections. just run through what's in it, process and applications. The design standards, a little more to this section probably. And then required improvements. So yeah, this is probably the section you may want to focus on or may be more familiar with, with your street requirements, sidewalk requirements and things like that. But again, we'll be looking at that and making sure that it's internally consistent and making sure it's clear and identify any issues. But at this point, pause to see if you have any issues with that entire chapter on subdivisions. All right. Moving on to zoning, this is another large chapter with a lot in it. We'll be looking at this. This is just this is the in general Article 1 portion of it. Not a lot there, just a lot of general language, I guess. You're including your definitions, administration, how things, how your public hearings work and time limits and things like that. This deals with Board of Adjustment. So a lot of this portion on how you make variances. Nonconformity section, always a good that's something to we're looking at closely, that language, because that's always an important section when you have a built out community. Things that were built before the current code and what happens and how much you can add to those, how much you can vary those, what happens if they get destroyed, things like that. So we'll be looking at that. I don't know if you've had any comments or issues with that. And then, of course, your district standards, very important. We'll be looking at that, making sure all your uses are covered and your setbacks are adequate or adequately addressed and clear. And then the district regulations themselves. And at this point, I'll pause to see if you have any questions on zoning. I know there's a lot to that section. Very important, probably the most common section that's used in most land development codes. Okay, good so far. Again, this is still more zoning, but and still more district standards, garages, or compressor units you'll see on this, access to property. I think the compressor units, we made a note, and I think the manager mentioned adding things like generators, pool pumps to that list of compressor units where you can put those. But that'll be part of the draft that we prepare. Detached buildings, garages, rentals, docks, etc. And then your supplementary district regulations, things like fences, commercial activities, city property, moving buildings, things like that. And I'll pause at this point if there's any comments that you see.
I think it's, I'm assuming you're going to handle this section at a time. And I'm sure we'll have questions as we go through the process. But we won't all be with you every step of the way. So how does that work? How do we know where you're at in the code? And how do we know to focus our attention at that time?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I'll probably coordinate with the manager on that, how we do this. Typically what we do is we prepare a report of our recommendations section by section, and I can present that to you again, or the manager can present it to you and have you discuss it section by section. And once you have seen that report, then we actually give you the strike through and underline portion of the code. That's, a thicker document, and that's probably the one to break up into sections or chapters probably.
Okay.
To go through, but yeah, I understand it's a lot to throw at you tonight. So, yeah, not expecting a lot of comments tonight, but definitely, yeah, you'll have more shots at this.
Oh, I have a question in the back.
Oh, yes, yes.
I am Jane Goldman, 437 22nd Street. One of the things that I usually do in business is I look at the stats and the historical, let's just say incidences that we've had over the last 5 years. So I can say for the Board of Adjustments, we regularly sit through ad nauseum the pool thing, right? Because the old rule was 18 inches above the middle of the street and blah, blah, blah. So what I've asked for and what I would like to see, and I hope it would help you, is let's look at some of the statistics, right? Things that we've all struggled with and we've spent a lot of time on, including the tower, the guy who's got the radio tower and all that stuff. And so he's slipping through a loophole that we would like to kind of fix.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we'd like to collaborate with you, but I also think we have to look at the past history in order to make sure that you're focusing on the things in our community that have really started to bother us.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that's a good topic for discussion, how we can coordinate, because I think I mentioned at the beginning, common variances that you've seen in the past. Those are good ones to definitely address in the land development code. What was the issue that keeps coming up? Sounds like pool heights. So yeah, I'll coordinate with you, give you my contact information, but that history would be very valuable. And that's typically how we do codes, either through staff or through the boards, especially the boards that do the variances, getting their input on it. So.
Yes, sir. Please come up.
Jerry Wizawati, 3100 Gulf Boulevard. Will you be addressing new technologies like EV charging stations and that type of thing?
Yeah, we do try to use, I think I mentioned at the beginning, best practices. And yeah, there's a lot of these codes are very old and don't recognize things like that. So yeah, that's a good, I'll make a note about EV charging stations. That's a common one. We also see a lot of parking standards that were just based on an old economy. Probably not so much here because you don't have commercial activity, commercial zones. But that's a common one. And so, yeah, we'll be looking to update things to address latest technologies. But yeah, EV charging stations is a good one.
I think that's it for now.
All right. Okay, telecommunication towers and antennas, it's an article under zoning. We will be looking at that. And sounds like there's an issue with an antenna. Again, we've seen these in other codes. Hopefully we can catch a lot of the common things, but we'll be looking for input. So any questions or input on that?
Well, the one the board member brought up, he claims it's an antenna, but it's truly a tower on an antenna.
Oh, okay.
And it's an FCC. Our attorney has been wrestling with their attorney for over a year now.
Oh, wow.
But it's still it's still in the yard where we're waiting. I think March is the time he has till gets back to the county with a permit, but I would like to see something substantially put in our ordinances to forbid that going forward.
Yeah, we'll definitely work closely with the attorney on that whole issue then.
Yes, Miss Elliott.
I'm aware that one of the adjoining property owners has some concerns about that one in particular, about the safety of their own house or pool, that if that tower fell, what would happen? And what are the standards for securing the tower? Has it meet some sort of construction standard, not like a,
I think
weekend project?
There are in fact standards, and that particular application is going through the permitting process with review by the county with specific attention towards wind mitigation and other factors. I would caution this council about talking about individual code enforcement matters, but just to say that that's going through review. When you're talking about, as I'm sure Mr. Cern is well aware, when you're talking about amateur radio antenna towers, it's a different analysis that you have to consider in terms of the accommodation and review process. It's going through that process. Nothing is a foregone conclusion as to how that process will resolve, but that doesn't mean that there's not value in looking at our code and determining if there's ways we can set that code better for both recognizing that process of accommodation, but also if there are restrictions that we can reasonably impose within the contours of the law, that this city explores them through this planning process.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. And I wasn't trying to address the specific issue, but just that, will the code address those types of standards? So it's good to hear.
Yeah, hopefully if you're getting things, actions that are a result of the code not being clear, yeah, hopefully we can address those. We'll definitely be working with staff on those issues.
And in these meetings, I would caution the council. I think this is what Randy was referring to, but we should stay away from individuals and individual properties whenever we're discussing potential code changes. I don't want it to appear that we're weaponizing our code. Please continue, sir.
Yes, and just finally, the last portion of the zoning chapter is just the two sections that wouldn't fit on the other page, the variance procedures and appeals dealing with telecommunications antennas. So that is your code. There, like I said at the beginning, there are other issues, there are other things that perhaps need to be included in your in subpart B, the land development code, that aren't currently. I just off the top of my head just looked at a section, adding a section perhaps on development agreements, and we can work with the attorney on that. I know they're referenced in the code, but the code does not specify a process for approving them, which, you know, we've added to codes in the past. I don't know if there's a need for temporary uses or special events. Again, these are just my thoughts to get you thinking about things that aren't currently addressed. As far as I know, food trucks, mobile food vending. I don't know if you want them or don't want to address them, but just something I did not see. Use of synthetic turf in landscaping. That's something we're seeing a lot of recently for some reason. I guess it's they've come up with really good new material that looks real. But you know, how do you want to address it? Do you want to address it? Things like that. Swimming pools currently in chapter 10, typically something that's in the land development code. And I understand there's probably some pool questions and issues that we'd be dealing with. And the same with docks. Currently they're in chapter 30. Considering moving those in the land development code. But that's basically it. I don't know if you have any other topics or questions, like where is a certain issue addressed or something new that I haven't discussed that you'd like for us to consider. I'd be glad to take any of your input on that.
Would you, let's see, what's the best way to word this? Every change we make to our code, every ordinance requires an economic impact study.
Yes.
So every little change, is that going to require an economic impact study?
And the attorney can correct me if I'm wrong. I think we would take the ordinance as a whole and look at the issues that are addressed in it. And hopefully we would not have anything that would have an impact on businesses. So like I said, we're not going to be dealing with a commercial use that we're going to disallow, I don't think, or something like that. So those are the things that I would steer clear of now, taking away a right that would affect a business. But yeah, that's.
I concur that you don't have to provide an independent analysis for each change. We will take it as an ordinance. One of the things we will look at is certainly consistency in our ordinances, that we're not just saying an ordinance amending the entire land development code.
Would that be
nice? We're trying to take it in sensible fragments, chapters, sections, whatever may be most appropriate. I've done a version of this in another community for its code of ordinances, not its land development code. And in that instance, we might have had, 3 chapters in one meeting and then 1 chapter that's going to be 3 meetings long. And so, you look at that way. As to the business impact study, obviously in this community, less relevant as you don't have a business sector, not altogether irrelevant as we have changed our economy towards and statutory rules towards home-based businesses and all these other things that, you know, sort of change the construct of what neighborhoods once were. So we'll have to have an eye towards those things, but it's not it is not as much consequence as it might be in other communities where you have a downtown, a business district, and other similar concerns.
Right. Yes.
Our neighboring town in Indian Rocks Beach had a lot of sensitivity around what has been expressed to the public as losing their grandfathering because of a change to their zoning. So what does that mean for us? And what does that mean in terms of what we need to be attentive to in these changes?
Excellent question. We talked about that. I know a little bit when you were on the last board talking about the comprehensive plan review. The reference to losing, I've heard, I chuckled only because I've heard people say losing their grandfather clause and then it gets shortened to losing your grandfather, which conjures some entertaining images. But what is at issue there is really specific to transient rentals or short-term vacation rentals. And subject to whatever happens, I think that's what, this legislative session.
Oh.
Presently, the state of the law is in 2011, the legislature preempted local communities' ability to regulate short-term rentals at all. But they said, unless you have something on the books before June 2011. This community has something on the books before June 2011, and it's able to and does enforce that. Then in 2014, they passed another amendment to that same section, Florida Statute 5090327B. And it's, since you're writing it, 509.0.0327B. Subsection 7, subsection B. But in that section, they walked back their preemption from full preemption to just a community cannot prohibit short-term rentals and cannot regulate duration or frequency of short-term rentals in any way that wasn't already on the books prior to June 2011. So again, if you have something, let's say, if you have something right now that let's say says 90 days and you're like, you know what, that's not working for us, let's make it 120 days, it's void altogether and you have no restriction. And so when you talk about the city of Indian Rocks Beach, before I was their city attorney and before my firm was their city attorney, they had amended their land development code, portions of their land development code, coming into compliance with some of the county consistency measures referenced by Mr. Serna, and in doing so, changed the regulations governing transient rentals, and they did it a second time and sort of set it back, but then sort of tacitly admits you did it. So with that, they lost that. My analysis has been that they've lost the ability to regulate that owing to the statute. And so to answer your question more narrowly as it relates to this code review, we will have to certainly be diligent, and I very much will, because this is, I don't wish to have a series of 6 and 7 hour meetings in this community too about short-term rentals. Making sure that as we do things for consistency, that we preserve, do not modify in any way that could be conceived as more restrictive or, you know, not already in your code as it relates to short-term rentals. And so it's looking, and that's reflected in the more recent comp plan amendments. So making sure that carries through in the LDRs, land development.
1 second, Mr. McIntyre.
Mark McIntyre, 3040 Hibiscus Drive West. One of the things that came up on planning and zoning along this same line was what's being referenced to now as, I think it's recreational Airbnb. Somebody could rent their pool out.
Yes.
Somebody could rent their dock out. Somebody could rent their tennis court out if they have one. So is that a modification that would put our restriction, our grandfathered Airbnb restriction? Would that put it at risk, or is that a modification that's worth considering? And does that come under this review?
Recognizing first that this is being recorded, and second, that I've not specifically have the code in front of me. What the answer is, it has the potential to jeopardize it depending on the manner in which you do it. And so we would have to navigate that. Obviously regulating partial rentals of a portion of a property for recreational purposes. Let's say you have a sound mixing room where you can do studio recording in your house. We would have to look at narrowly tailoring that in a way that could not be construed as falling within the scope of 509032. But I have seen that as something that communities have addressed, and I've raised that with staff previously.
It was an open issue when we went through this.
Mhm.
Just thought it was something. Back. A bit more.
Understood.
Ms. Elliott, did you have another question?
No, thank you.
Okay, please proceed.
Well, so basically, that concludes what I was going to talk, the introduction of what I was going to talk about. I think based on what I'm hearing, I'll work closely with the manager, and based on the direction he gives you, we're working for the town. So we want to do this in the way that works best for you. But typically the plan is to prepare a report on your land development regulations, present that to you, and then work on the individual chapters or sections, however you want to break it down, prepare those and strike through underline for you to look at. And again, give you more opportunities to have input. So we're not going to prepare a final draft and give it to you. We're going to give it to you in as we recommend, and any other input you want to give us, we'll incorporate into that. So
Is it possible that whenever you start moving forward on this, you could provide us with a tentative schedule, where we are, what we've done, so that we can focus our attention on what you're going to be working on in the coming days?
yeah, that's a good point. That way you can work ahead, do a little bit of homework. Yes, well, I'll work on that.
Okay,
Make that a point to do that.
thank you. Anything else?
That's all I have.
Okay. Well, Louis, I appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your input.
I look forward to working with you, and look forward to seeing some of these much needed code changes.
Thank you. Yeah, I do as well.
All right, so now we're going to move on to item 2. This was placed on the agenda by Councilmember Roberts. It's discussion on employee pay study. Mr. Roberts, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Kyle, how long ago was it when Grady's predecessor retired? About a year?
2022.
Okay. So when that happened, at that time, we had a service worker 2 and a service worker 3 were the 2 positions that we had that were filled by 2 people only. The person in the 3 position retired. And at that point, the right decision was made to place the person who was the service worker 2 into the service worker 3 position and advertise for the service worker 2. What caught my eye at that time was it took an extraordinary amount of time, in my opinion, for somebody to fill that position, leaving our working staff with 1 person in what I would consider the field work, which made Kyle spend even more time in the field than he normally did in his position. So when I looked at that, I said, well, what might be a reason? The salaries didn't look like they were enough, just based on my gut and my experience in those type of jobs. So I talked to Kyle. By that time, Aaron was on board. We talked about some solutions. One was we added an additional service worker 2 on board, giving us 3 field workers. So we had to hire an additional person there. Also, that took a long time to fill that position. So, and my gut feel told me was this is because people really aren't attracted to that particular salary. So I asked Kyle a couple of times. We talked about it. By that time, I think Aaron was on board. And I said, hey, could we do a pay study to see what other towns and cities are paying similar type employees? So staff did a great job providing us, the council, with many similar type positions. I don't know how many of you have ever been involved in a corporate pay study with the companies you work for. I've been involved with more than a handful, and you get overloaded with all of this data. And the first thing you're trying to do when you're trying to help your staff is, okay, which of these jobs are really close to the positions that my staff do? And you're filtering through all that and looking at the numbers. And you're paying a consultant typically a fair amount of money to do all this work for you. And they come up with a magic number. It gets kicked back and forth between HR and it's no fun. We're not really in that situation because we're such a small town, which is wonderful. And I think that gives us a lot more flexibility as well. Because when hopefully we make a salary adjustment here, it's not really costing the city that much money because we don't have 30 employees in this job class that adds to our budget withdrawal. So all that being said, I felt like, again, that the salary the current employees are getting is not sufficient. I think the demand of our citizens is such that we really need to get the best employees to do this work. And the fact that we only have 3 field staff makes it even tougher. Currently, the service worker 2 is paid $18 an hour, and the service worker 3 is paid $21 an hour. The town that I felt was closest to our positions and closest to the kind of the size of our city and the makeup of our city, in my opinion, was Redington Shores, Redington Beach. Both of them, interestingly enough, paid kind of almost the same amount of money per hour. The information that we got from Redington Beach for the public grounds worker, they gave us an annual salary. You could quickly do the math. They're paying $22.05 an hour. Also, Redington Shores is paying $22.05 an hour. Then their crew leader is being paid $28.35. So just on paper, I feel fairly confident in saying that the $18 per hour rate that our field staff person gets is similar to the 22 of Redington Shores, Redington Beach. And the crew leader of $28.35 an hour is similar to the $21 an hour staff person and responsibilities. In addition to that, from what I understand, many of the tasks that Redington Beach and Redington Shores perform, a lot of that is actually outsourced. So they are basically managing the contracts of the companies that are coming in that they've outsourced that particular task. So without getting into a lot more detail, because I'm confident that probably most of us already looked through the various towns and cities and what they're paid. Again, they have a lot of those. They kind of break it down, most of the bigger cities like that. St. Pete Beach as an example, or Oldsmar. They have a lot of field staff out there doing those type of tasks. So I have no problem, and we can of course discuss this as a group of jumping their current rates from those lower rates that we pay currently to the rates that Redington Beach and Redington Shores pay, which are the 22. And so that's basically adding $4 an hour to the service worker 2. And if we took that same $4 and added it to the crew leader's current salary, I think we would be just looking at some dollar values there. That would be about 16,000 for the 2 service worker 2s in total a year, and another 8. So we're talking about $24,000 a year additional that will come out of the salary in your budget, Kyle. How are you set for that now? If you had to pay an additional $24,000 a year in salary to the 3 individuals that are in those positions. So we've been without a couple of salaries for a little bit of time. That money accumulates for this year's budget. What are your thoughts?
Well, we definitely would need a budget adjustment.
And
I would
and
have-
that's exactly what I wanted to hear. Generally, we don't get into the weeds on individual employee salary. And the reason why is because that employee reports directly to the city manager.
Mhm.
And even our charter states that we don't really get involved. I don't have a problem with a pay increase, certainly. But it seems that really all we need is an amendment to the budget. Give us something to vote on
Mhm.
and there we go. I don't need a whole lot of justification because I understand that inflation, everyone I know that it's in business, they've had to give salary increases to keep up.
Mhm.
But as far as your study, I appreciate it, but I think it probably should have stopped at the city manager and then let the city manager come to us and ask for something because ultimately they're his responsibility.
Okay,
I,
That is what George said.
yeah, it does. And so you can certainly help the city manager, but I would encourage everyone to not get too close with the staff.
all right, but Kyle could come back with this data and information and then come to us as a request, as a budget amendment.
Yes,
approval of
yes,
the budget.
and that's really all we need is
Sure.
because I don't want to know. I don't want to discuss any particular role because you're talking about one individual. You're talking about this individual. You're talking
Mhm.
about this individual, and I think it's okay for me to keep the staff that I've got. I would like to propose a budget amendment. Would you please vote on it?
Perfect.
So we can discuss kind of the study. And then I'll make a recommendation.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. One more thing is, I'm just curious, have you gone to the individuals and the staff and questioned them or have you been asking them about their feelings?
I talked to Aaron because I knew he was the one that was collecting this data. And the other day I went back for the first time and actually saw their building back there with the equipment. That's pretty cool, back in the woods.
Yeah.
But
I mean, if you had discussions with them about their pay or anything like that.
I may have.
Okay, all
Yeah, I
right.
may have.
Well, and I always want to make sure that we keep our distance
Right.
because the charter, it basically says you're not supposed to do that.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Bankert.
I thank you for bringing this up because I've been harping on this for 3 years on council that our staff's been underpaid. From our city clerk to our city manager, even our old city manager, our old city clerk. And I've never done any direct billing, but for example, working at the sandbag station. People would come up and be thanking the guys and saying these guys are all underpaid, right? Never dealt with the people directly. But I said, these guys deserve more money. And I didn't get one negative reply that they did. But I really appreciate what you did here. I think we should be Premier City.
Oh, of course.
The other thing that I would like to know, the salary stink, in my opinion, okay? It's the best word I can describe it, but. And I think you're right, 100% right, how many people are gonna be drawn into that to take the job. And that's why it's a long delay.
Sure.
I would like to know what the other communities face when they have to fill, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
They have the same problem. No, I really, I think you did an excellent job. I don't think you went out of bounds here at all. I'm glad that someone else is addressing.
Good, thanks.
Yes.
Subject to the mayor's well-taken provisos and with full respect to your role as the manager of these people. Just one comment I might offer is that as one looks at salary increases, these are minor in terms of total budget, but they're probably 30% and upwards in terms of percentages. And so other staff members tend to look at any kind of increases and it starts looking for internal equity in terms of raises. So I just lay that out there as a general supervisor.
I agree. I think that's important to take into factor when you're making these decisions. So, yeah, we'll discuss.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay, and I do appreciate it, all the hard work that you've put into this. I really wasn't looking forward to having this conversation, but I'm glad it's over with.
I
I can't take credit for the work. Staff did the work, so. I just asked the question.
Okay, anything else on item 2? All right, let's move on to item 3. This is discussion on city manager salary. This is placed on the agenda by Councilmember Bankert.
When we brought on Kyle as city manager, it was an agreement of 2 years at a fixed rate. Inflation has gone through the roof. I think Kyle asked for a review when he first came on, which we did do a review, all our council members. We looked at the reviews, he's done an excellent job. And I think he deserves more money today, but we have a salary increase for our employees coming up, generally in March, April. But when you do the annual percentage increases or whatever.
Oh, that's on their anniversary
Yeah,
date. But we'll propose something what we're talking about is adjusting the current rates, and the start, like the pay that they're at now.
So we do it on the anniversary of each employer.
Each
We do
employee.
it, so it's not done in March or April or May. What I would like to see him get his increase for this year, retroactive January 1st. We have a young lady here, it's the city clerk that's done an excellent job. We had to bring her in at a higher rate than I believe our old was getting. I still think you're underpaid. I think she should get another, I think she should get a bump this year. I don't want to lose either one of these excellent employees. We just gave him an excellent award. And I think he deserves it. We've got a bargain here.
Council? Yes.
When was your anniversary date, your original one?
So when I became city manager, that was November 21, or November 20, it was a Sunday, was what we retro paid. I think I was given the contract was signed on November 28th, I want to say. We bounced it back because it was mid-pay week
Of
of
2022.
2022.
Okay. 11 of 2022, okay. So according to the contract then, on 11, so after 2 years, the third year.
Yes.
You would
It was
be
a 3-year
eligible, so
term.
23, so 11/24 is when you would be eligible,
Correct.
according to the current contract.
Yes.
And since we're talking about it, the contract is through November 21, 2025.
Right, the whole contract.
The whole contract term is through November 2025.
Oh, the one thing that I did not see was any type of comparison. I didn't have any numbers to look at to compare how below or above he was. It would have been nice to have that in the agenda.
Well,
So,
we did do a comparison of the look for city managers. I believe the salary range was 128,000. Don't hold it. You know what I'm saying?
well, there's a lot that's happened since we brought him.
Oh.
And so, I would definitely like to see something. Are there other comments about this? I mean, we don't even know what we would be voting on at this point, other than a salary increase, but we don't know what that even looks like.
Well, I didn't put no number out there because if you remember when we were discussing, looking for it, it was a roundtable discussion,
Mhm.
and that's when we came up with the 128 figure and all of that. And some were making 160, and some were making 125, but most of them were making well over 125,000.
Do we know if any of the comparable positions receive bonuses?
Other
The only-
city managers, you mean?
Right.
Not that I ever.
I haven't heard.
Bonuses is not,
No.
generally speaking, I mean, it's a little different with managers in that they have contracts. But, generally speaking, bonuses are disfavored for public employees and their statutory authority that cautions against it. Usually if there is a bonus, it has to be based on, articulated criteria, merit-based, eligible to, usually in an employment policy, eligible for all employees, those sorts of things. As for the manager, sometimes you do see performance incentives. For instance, if the clerk had a contract, in some instances, you see, okay, if you become CMC certified, you get, we'll do this or something like that. But not common in a managerial position.
Thanks for that. I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing any compensation that might
A
otherwise.
lot of employees in Florida got COVID bonuses and all other bonuses. The teachers got bonuses, so it can work, but
Yeah. That was combat pay.
Well, I appreciate, yes, go ahead.
So under section 4, salary, page 414, Randy, you have that?
I'm sorry, you're looking at the manager's contract?
Yes, yes.
Go ahead.
Page 414, section 4, salary.
Mhm.
Paragraph B. Beginning in the third, we already talked about this. Beginning in the third year of the contract term, the manager shall be entitled to an increase in base salary as determined by the city council. Then this next sentence is what I just wanted to clarify in my own head. The contemplated salary increase shall take effect on the anniversary date of this agreement. Clear. The same annual percentage as other city employees.
Yes,
So is
sir.
that like predetermined? So if the annual percentage that the council had said, okay, we're giving city employees 4%.
I think that's a cost of living increase is what that is.
Right. The way that was contemplated, short answer, yes. The manager, one of the benefits we had in crafting this based on time is the manager is, his anniversary date is in November. You should, provided everything's working as it should, have your budget adopted by October 1. So by that point, you will have established that all your employees will or will not get a salary increase of as follows in the budget. And sometimes referred to COLA, sometimes just salary increase. I get leery of the names because I've seen things break down over what people are calling it, but be that as it may, if all the employees got a 4.1% increase, then it's to make sure the manager gets the benefit of that bargain. And that was something that Kyle and I actually specifically discussed in the negotiations process. Some manager contracts just say, this is the graduation, or no, this is what you get, flat rate, three-year term, this is what you get over the 3 years. And so you'll get an increase, but it will be in alignment with your employees.
Okay.
And so that was, and again, the contract is based on the terms we negotiated at that time. A contract can always be revisited if that's the desire of this body. We can develop an amendment as appropriate, but that was how it was contemplated.
Okay.
Kyle, when was your original hire?
Yeah, that's what.
Oh, even way. First started here, June 4th, 2018.
So even if we retro or brought him into scope that original thing would help you.
Well, we're gonna need some numbers. We're gonna need something to vote on. We can't just say we're doing it without knowing what it is we're doing. So,
Can we direct Kyle to find out what Indian Rocks Beach is paying? Dira, Reddington's, the Redding, city manager, I think you have much,
No,
and then bring that back to us.
yeah, I can find it.
Al, I'd like for you to go out and tell us how much you'd like to make.
Blank check.
I think we had a spreadsheet on that, Kyle, when we were going through this process before. It even gave in a column, for example, 10 years experience as a city manager, et cetera. This is what they're making. So it's.
Really old data right now. You know,
No, I get that. Yeah.
All right, well, I certainly am open to continuing on this discussion with some hard numbers. While we are talking about that, let's continue talking about pay. the one, you've talked about the staff and you've talked about the city manager and you've talked about the clerk. For some reason, you won't talk about the city attorney. I don't blame you there. But you've not discussed the council. It's getting harder and harder to fill our seats. And so I contacted Renee and she did a quick study of all the communities around Pinellas County. I don't think she got to all of them.
You get one of them.
No. it's possible.
But
Randy gets one. Enough for Randy.
I do.
And Randy, you're next. I'm going to try to.
Try and reduce my thing.
You got one? Yeah, okay.
There. We're good.
Okay, so as you can see, the lowest, other than no compensation, which by the way, the two no compensations, you see there's 7,500 population and 6,382 population. And then the very lowest that's giving compensation is 9,019 population. So they certainly have a lot more people to go through to find possible willing candidates that are either eligible or at least willing to complete a Form 6 and get involved with their local municipal government. I think that going forward in the future, we're going to continue having problems like we're having right now, where no one's interested. They don't want to do the Form 6. So I would not consider this actual compensation as much as I would, whenever I look at these numbers. Some of them are large, but I would look at this in these small towns. This looks more like appreciation pay. It's showing, it's the city showing the council that, yeah, we appreciate you being here because we don't want to do it. It's the way that I look at it. And whenever you look at what they're getting, I would say that certainly some of that could be used to help with filing Form 6. Could be used for an umbrella policy, for their own protection. There's a lot of things that could be done for the council. Now, if we were to select something like this and vote it through, it would not impact any of us. This would be, according to our code, if we decided to move forward with paying the council, it requires 2 elections. So I'm all on board of moving forward with this for council in the future. And I think that everyone here should seriously consider it because it's just going to continue getting worse. The state of Florida is going to continue bearing down on us more and more. They're going to make it harder and harder for us to do our job. And then, of course, also you've got the possible dangers of frivolous lawsuits and all sorts of shenanigans that target you. So Mr. Banker, you actually made the comment last week that it was crazy and you were, you couldn't believe it. So I'd like to go ahead and hear your comments now that you've seen this study.
Thank you. First of all, none of these are overwhelming pay for any council members. I guess the highest here is Reddington Shores. I don't know if they get benefits. I don't know what they need by benefits, but Beller Shores, I don't see them on here. I don't believe they get any compensation. How many other communities around here don't get compensation? I think it's a privilege to serve the people here. I don't think anyone here needs $400 a month, $800 a month. And if we have that kind of money, let's give it to the employees that work here. We'll even throw some to Randy on the side. I mean, if
No, that's not what I'm talking about. That's not the question.
this money should be used for the dedicated staff that comes in here 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. This man here, 24 hours 24/7. She's 24/7 anymore. And I could never accept a dime from these taxpayers for doing this job. I'm privileged to do this job. I feel privileged. I thank God for the privilege of doing this job to represent his people. You can't put a value on it. This is really just picking the pockets of the taxpayers. We have that kind of money to give out every month, give it to the employees that deserve it.
Okay. Yes.
I feel like if, and of course, well, we would never know the answer to this question. How many people out there in our city were maybe on the edge of deciding to run for a seat on our council? Coupled with the infamous Form 6, felt like, well, golly, now I may have to hire an accountant and or a lawyer to assist me with this to make sure it's done right. That's going to cost me money. If this small compensation would help in having other people run to want to sit on this council, I would be in favor of that. As the mayor just said, this is not going to impact us because we'll be gone before any monies come our way. I don't think there would actually be people out there that would say, wow, now that I'm going to be paid, I'm in. I don't think that's the type of person that would run. I do think there may be some people out there that are reluctant to run because they feel like they have to come out of pocket to deal with the Form 6 information and data gathering. And if this would help them to want to run and help our city, I'm for that.
Ms. Elliott.
If part of the purpose is to fill the vacant seats that we have now, maybe if I could ask our attorney to address, can that happen? Can we act fast enough?
No.
And would it impact new people?
I think the mayor's aptly spoken to the restrictions in your code and otherwise by statute on how certainly you could not make it for the here and now today. I think by statute, the soonest you could make it is your next commission. I believe your community has its own provisions to say not just the next, but the one after that. We're also incidentally looking at changing intervals by which you elect those people. So that might also push that time even further out, depending on what happens in the charter. So no, you couldn't do it to entice anybody today or in 2024 for that matter.
So for the election that's held in March, well, never mind.
There will be no election.
There-
Have no
there- yeah,
impact
just totally-
You
immediately.
guys vanquished all the competition with your names alone.
See, right now, we're in a situation where we're having to do something new. We're having to contact our CPAs. We're having to pay money to serve on the council. And even though Mr. Bankard completely disagrees with this, I'm hearing right now that there's a possibility that even though we can't vote, even if 3 of us vote yes, he still blocks it. Okay. But I'm having this conversation because I want to know where the council stands.
Roy, you made a comment because you reviewed the Form 6 tape, and this is a 2-part question. And my wife was an accountant. I don't think it's that dramatic to fill this out like that, but you even said it doesn't look that hard. It's not going to be that aggravating to fill it out.
Do you own a business?
Well, if you.
I'm asking you a question. Do you own a business?
No.
Okay. Kyle, you know just about everyone in this community. How many, on a percentage, how many would you say own businesses in this community?
Over 50%, it seems like.
Okay. And a lot of them are property, they have multiple properties scattered around the country.
I got more. problems.
These are difficult. There's a lot involved. If my wife had to fill out a Form 6, it'd be awful. You look at what Brian Scott is having to do right now with the county. Now, he signed up for that. He knew he was going to have to do a Form 6. But if you go and you look, every stock that he has ties to whatsoever is listed. Everyone. And so he had to go into his mutual funds and he had to go and get granular and fill it all out.
Yeah.
So if you look at other people, such as Tallahassee people, they don't seem to fill out much of anything at all. But what I've noticed is that at a municipal level, we're small. Everyone knows each other, and the last thing they ever want to get caught up in is lying on a form. So at this level, we are going to spend the money, and we're going to have to pay somebody to help us through it. In fact, I'm having to do it myself. You know, it may turn out that it's pretty simple whenever it's done, but this first time around, I need to make sure that I'm covered. Going back to my original question was, what's the majority? Right now, I'm hearing maybe two.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how about you?
Am I a business owner?
I'm just talking about, how do you feel about appreciation pay for the council?
I think it's a very interesting idea. If we can't impact anybody coming in soon, there may not be any urgency.
Well, there is urgency because we're about to have an election. There's a difference between 3 and 6 years.
Help me understand that then, because the election,
The election is in March. If
Right.
we don't pass this before March, then you have to wait 2 more elections. So let's say we hem-haw around about this and finally we decide, let's move forward with it. It could be up to nearly, 7 or 8 years before the council is eligible to even receive the minimal pay that I'm proposing.
oh, that was part of my question then, so thank you. So it can't impact anybody that we might attract to the board soon,
Correct.
even after the election.
Right.
But the following election, it'll impact them.
Yes. And honestly, if the
It
council,
has to be done before March to impact those coming in 25.
So the language referenced is in I think at this point in the discourse of warrants, just apologies for the interruption. But section 2.03 of your code, rather of your charter, states the council by ordinance shall determine the annual salary, if any, of council members, the mayor and vice mayor. But no ordinance establishing or increasing such salary shall become effective until the date of commencement of the terms of council members elected at the second regular election following passage of the ordinance. A little dense in that last bit there, but the way it would be administered is technically there's a regular election in March of 2024. And then provided cycles didn't change, the next one is, I think, March 2025. And so it would not be until after that. The mayor's saying, well, in the first instance, if we don't do it until August, let's say, now you're going to have to wait till the 2025 cycle and the 2026 cycle. The other issue is that one of the ballot measures you have proposed, and this is a whole nother web of the multiverse here, if you will, of options, is there's a proposal to change your election cycle to November. If and only if you also extend council members' terms to 4 years. And so you would be going out to 2026, and I think 2028 and 2030 would be your election cycles. So potentially, this could be your next election cycle wouldn't be until after 2028. If all those things are approved. And so that would be the soonest that I think it could phase, if I'm remembering all of the interplay. And so I think that's what the mayor's sense of urgency is to this, trying to explain that and contextualize it.
So it would have to be a change in our ordinance, correct?
Yes, you would have to do it by ordinance, yes. And so, yes.
And so doesn't that require several readings and?
2 readings, first and a second reading, which we are at the end of January, depending on how much this council, again, at the will of the council. If it was a priority for the council, let's say all of you are in agreement
Like
and
the
it's a
fact-
priority, this, we could conceivably have this done before the March election, because we could always call a special meeting, which we've done in the past in other contexts to, you know, let's say first reading as soon as next week, right? You're
see.
technically scheduled to meet next week, provided you intend to do so. So you have a meeting next week, you do first reading then, and then if it remains a priority of the council and it passes first reading, we could schedule something probably as soon as the third week. Our limiting factor there is an ordinance on second reading has to be advertised in the paper. And so newspapers not being what they used to be in terms of cycles and print lead times, et cetera, usually want to budget at least 14 days. So the soonest you would probably get is maybe the third or fourth week of February. You could have a second and final reading if you so desired. So it is possible to achieve enacting it in that timeline if that is the desire of this body.
Is it possible to draft an ordinance in such a way that they will be compensated in such amount as the board may determine it's at some frequency or at some event, so that we don't specify the amount now?
We certainly don't have to specify anything today unless you're wanting something on first reading next week. I would need to know. But the way that the language reads, it says the council by ordinance shall determine the annual salary. So to me, that would suggest as written that the ordinance would have to state what the amount is. In some other context, you might have, for example, let's say we've had a lot of discussions here about your marina. You might say, there shall be a fee required for the marina that shall be set by resolution. And we do that later. You
Okay.
can't do that. I don't think that would be appropriate here where it says the ordinance shall determine the salary. And so I would, reading that by its plain text, I think the more precise reading would be the ordinance itself must state the salary amount if you're inclined to move in that direction.
And it looks to me like if the council decided they weren't getting paid enough, this is always the big fear. I'm not getting paid enough. We need to vote. We need to vote to increase our salary. Well, according to our charter, even the increases apply the same way. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's anytime,
So-
it would be an ordinance determining the salary, and so it would still be subject to based on the language of
So
the
you-
charter, it'd be the 2 election cycles.
2 more election cycles. And so my point is that I don't have a problem setting up the council of the future to at least get some compensation. I hear it over and over. This is a thankless job. We all know that it's a thankless job. This is the one way that I can think of that, hey, you're getting a little bit of cash to offset the expenses. We all spend money doing this job. I think there's been twice that I've turned in mileage. I never turn in mileage on my car. And I go all over the place, meetings and events and yes, sir. It's not this is not really the same forum, but since you're the only one here, I'll take it.
Andrew Wellings with 709 Harbor Drive. So to that end, you just said like almost treating it like a business expense. Could any of these things be submitted as expenses to the community?
What's that now?
Like you said, you wanted some help with having an accountant.
For the Form 6.
Instead of trying to deliver it as a salary to somebody, could it just be an expense that you
I think
submit?
the problem is you're having to audit, it's your personal finances. I think that would be misuse of.
But if it's for a state form that's required, it's like you're trying to meet the requirement of Form 6, and that's the only reason you're doing it. It's like a
Well, no,
government
that's
requirement.
not the only reason.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying that.
But you're not doing it for personal reasons. You're doing it to meet
This
requirements to be on the board.
This is not for me at all. This is for future councils.
No, I understand your request to do the salary thing. I understand your request for salary. I'm saying, could you not do it as a salary proposal?
Just expenses.
And just submit it as an expense, and you're not subject to these waiting, 2 terms before it could even be.
Oh, you're
implemented.
talking about just in general, how do we also?
Right, like if I were to consider to be on this board, like you say, I had to say all the concerns you just mentioned, there's like.
Okay, so let's just say that my Form 6 is simple.
Right.
But Mr. Big Bucks businessman over here,
Right.
it's thousands
Right,
to
right.
create that report. Because
Yeah.
you see what I'm saying? So
I see, yeah, but like you said, your salary wasn't gonna be full compensation. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you could come up with some more. I'm just thinking of ideas that might allow you to do it earlier, not wait for 2 terms before it could do anything. You said you submit mileage. I'm imagining you travel anywhere on the behalf of the city council. You kind of submit an expense report. You can, at least.
right.
You may or may not do that, but could you do that as an option for this scenario? You could get, like, if you needed to consult a lawyer or something to help you with just feeling comfortable that you filled this form out properly.
You're saying turn in your accountant fees for Form 6.
Yeah, and maybe like you say, if it's thousands of dollars, maybe if there's an unrealistic limit, there is some realistic limits that maybe you'd have to put on it. I don't know. I'm just throwing options on the table for you.
Well, there,
No, I thought, I think, I'm sorry.
no, how about with Randy answering, or could we do that legally?
So if I'm understanding the gentleman's comments, the question on the floor is, rather than set a salary for the position, if one of the more acute concerns is compliance costs, Form 6 would have you make provision not for a salary, but for a reimbursement scheme, for example, whereby you say each council member shall, let's say, because I'm a lawyer and I'm just going to make it easy on the math, I'm not suggesting an amount. If you said $1,000 a month, well, that goes to $12,000 a year. So what if we said you're reimbursed for those costs not to exceed $6,000 a year upon presentation? Can we do that? I think we can do that. The how of how it all works, I hadn't specifically considered that before tonight. I'd want to make sure, we made it clear it wasn't a salary. If we're going to, pull it out of there, of course, nothing's an issue until someone makes it an issue. So there's always the possibility that we say we're going to go down that road, someone challenges it. But I think we could. I'd want to see how that may be done in other communities, if at all, to make sure we're looking at best practices. I'm not aware of something that specifically prohibits it.
Yeah,
As I sit here now.
I appreciate your input, sir, and I think we're probably overcomplicating the question. I just again, I really think that the council should be compensated for their time.
Well, Dave, let's bargain,
Okay,
okay? I want the flooding issue addressed sincerely, aggressively.
we haven't got to that yet.
Well, there's a thing on the table right now that was turned down by one sewer. Or that's it.
This is another situation. Okay. Well, I'm going to bargain with you then. All right. So if you're even willing to consider it, I've already had a conversation with Kyle and I told him that if I couldn't get this passed, that I would not vote for his raise. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and it's in your court.
Well, if you want to put Kyle in that predicament, that's up to you, but then Kyle could be looking for a job and going through this whole gambit again, but
Well,
I'll take my bargain.
okay. All right. Any other comments or questions about that?
Again, I've already said that I would be in favor of that in the hopes that that would bring other people into the movement to be on the council. I think the citizens' recommendation could also happen, especially for the first time, because that was a comment that was made by one of the leaders of that session that I saw online. And he felt confident that the first time every council member or commission member went through the Form 6, it would be a struggle, even if it wasn't complicated finances. But the following years, just like it was with the Form 1, the first time I did the Form 1, I had to pull out files and look at stuff. The next year I pulled out the old Form 1 and said, would anything change? No. So it was pretty simple to do the follow-up Form 1s. He was implying that the Form 6 would be similar once you've gone through it, unless of course your business has changed tremendously or something like that.
All right. Well, Any other comments, Ms. Elliott?
I'd like to brainstorm that a little bit in terms of a reimbursable expense, whether it be a cash reimbursement or it could be everyone to ensure our compliance as a city and our personal our own council members are in compliance. Maybe it's you get up to 3 hours of consulting, whether it be with Randy or someone else to just, how do you fill out the form?
Again, you're talking about private personal finances that, and anytime that you do that, there's a possibility for scrutiny. I think that what you do with that Form 6 is on you. And yeah, it's nice to have some compensation to help pay for it if that's what you want to do with your money.
Well, I'm thinking maybe even if it's not compensation, but that and it's not a reimbursable expense to the individual, but it is a benefit available that the city pays for. So for instance, the city's going to, whether it's a CPA, whether it's Randy, whether it's someone else, but you come in and say, okay, I need to disclose my car. Is that retail? Is that trade-in value? Is that, person-to-person value? Because, Blue Book uses 3 different ones. Which one is it? Someone can help with those questions and almost a walk-in situation where you can have some consulting time with someone. And would that help relieve people's concerns that, hey, if you're considering a post now,
I think in this community, I wouldn't think so. I think in this community, the pay or the reimbursement, that's not the problem here. The problem is people don't want to reveal their personal business.
That's absolutely
That's
true.
that's it in a nutshell. That's why the people aren't beating down our door to join the council. Again, this is just something to show the council that they are appreciated. It's not a lot of money and we won't get it. But I think that if somebody doesn't open the door, eventually we're going to be in a vulnerable position to where the state of Florida will start looking at us because we can't fulfill our charter. And that's the last thing that I want to do. And whenever I hear people say it all the time, it's a thankless job. Well, yeah, that's true. It really is, you feel good about it on the inside, but on the other hand, whenever the phone's ringing and people are complaining and they're not happy and the council is arguing and yeah, it is a thankless job.
I disagree. I think it's a thankful job. I get a lot of thanks. I'm glad to do it.
Well, you're one. I'm paid. I'm not getting paid and I'm here. So
I get paid this morning, working we're helping out in the county. I'm not getting paid now. I mean, and I thank my Lord I have the opportunity to do that.
all right, well, here's what I'm proposing is I would like, even though we don't have a majority, I would like to have placed on the agenda a match for Indian Harbor Beach as the compensation for the city council after the time delay, after it's approved. And I would like that placed on the agenda. Randy, can you draw that up?
I certainly can, Mayor.
Okay, I understand Frank is not going to vote on it. He's going to vote no, but I would still like the opportunity to vote on it. And I would like that to be presented before your pay increase. Okay. All right, now let's move on to item number 4, discussion on the stormwater project.
Just one quick question on that last issue. If we were by some miracle to get 2 people to come up before the meeting and say they want to be considered for council seats, and from a timing standpoint, would they actually be appointed prior to us voting on certain things, or how would that work? Typically in the agenda.
Well, currently, we are not accepting applications for nominees.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, every time we open it up, there's a deadline. And we kept extending and extending and extending,
fair
and then it was getting so close to the election that it was pulled.
Got it.
So what's the process? If applicants come along, what would be the process to open it?
Well, it's just a matter of notifying the city clerk that we're now accepting applications again, but we have to give a definitive start and stop time.
So if applicants are interested, they go and pick up the form or download it from the website and fill it out, then present it, then we know, okay, somebody's interested, we might open up that process then.
That could work.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. All right. Item 4, this is placed on the agenda by Councilmember Elliott. Do you prefer Shaw Elliott or just Elliott?
It's Elliott.
Okay,
official, yeah.
all right. Discussion on stormwater project, possible solutions and engineering estimate.
Yes, thank you very much. Obviously, there was a lot of disappointment at the last meeting with the failure to pass the stormwater project. And if I can begin with just a little bit of background here. I was very excited when I first learned about this project and knew that it was part of our strategic plan and watched it for a couple years for the progress and waited for my street to come up and checked on the progress and the budgets and thought, oh, good, it's happening. And then it didn't happen. And then the idea was floated for the bond issue, which I thought was a tremendous idea. I learned as much about it as I could. I came and testified before this group, my support of that bond issue for all the reasons that everyone else identified. The idea that we could get better pricing as a group, the idea that we could address the change in our weather conditions or climatic conditions with the intensity and frequency of the storms growing, so that we could get it done quicker, that there'd be less movement of equipment throughout over a period of time. So all these wonderful, favorable things, interest rates were great. But as part of that, I did say that this was an opportunity to look at improvements, to not do exactly that was done before, but to look for some appropriate improvements that we can incorporate into this project. That didn't happen. And so with my first meeting as a member of this council, this came up for vote. And I understood Frank's frustration because I felt that there was an opportunity lost to be able to bring some improvements into the project. At least evaluate them, examine them, study it, see what's there. However, I was also faced with the situation that you have the facts as they are. That study hadn't happened. And it was important to move the project forward. So I voted in favor. And so here we are now that it's been declined. So what can we do as a group to move this forward? Because I think we all feel that it's important and this project needs to be completed. We don't want to lose the pricing. We don't want to have a storm come through and have devastating loss in our community if it could be prevented with this now. So I asked that we move this forward and we were trying to think of ways that we might do so and agree as a group. So one of the ideas that was proposed is let's study it. Let's get a study of what would it cost to bring some improvements to this project. If the study says, don't do it, it's not feasible, we'll know that, but we don't have those facts right now. And I think it's a mistake to make the decision without having those facts before us. So I would suggest that we look at this proposal, we can tweak it, we can improve it if need be. But I would suggest if we as a group can agree to have that proposal, conduct the study and approve the project as it is now, but add this study for an immediate tag on.
Frank?
Well, we have a resident right there that just got flooded out in December storm. He watched his neighbor bailing out water or pushing out water out of his garage that he just redid after a dahlia. And I went around and decided to run again, and thank you for your signature, okay? But I was also told, try to get this fixed. And I pledged these people, I'm gonna try to get it fixed, all right? Thank God I ended up getting them, but you know this is bad, okay? You know when we said this will not resolve anything. Why would we spend $4 million to go forward? I have a real problem with that. And I voted for the budget, or I voted for the bond issue. I made it crystal clear, it's on the record, only if we do it right. And I was told we're gonna bring the engineer in, and he's gonna present plans, and we're gonna design things that we're going to do it. The first set of plans that he came in during the work session, I said, how does this alleviate flooding? Well, we're gonna put a drain in here, he said. And I don't want to repeat myself. I said, but how does it reduce flooding? Because once that drain fills up with 300 gallons of water, where's the other 8 gallons gonna go? In the street, in your home. And the only way to get rid of it is using a forced method, whether it's pump or whatever. And he said it twice on the floor, or he said it on a work session, he also said it on the floor, and you were there, you made great arguments. So my question is, why would we do this? Again, why would we spend $4 million of the taxpayers' money? We're going to repave a few streets. How many pipes are we actually replacing in this whole project? It's only a handful from what I see.
Yeah, most of the, we're lining
Yeah.
the cure in place.
Yeah. So we're not even replacing 60, 70-year-old concrete pipes that were probably, when they were poured, had a lot of ash in them. Now, yeah, concrete pipes can last 100 years. These are 60, 70 years old, 100 years in great conditions. That's fresh water. These are in salt, right? Who knows how they were put in with chains, binders, or whatever, where the outside's cracked and you can't see the inside.
Just, my understanding was that the pipes, although may not be fully replaced, they were lined. Weren't they getting new liners?
Right, the pipes that were damaged,
Damage.
we proposed to clean and line them.
Mhm.
Because again, it was looking at the overall systems. If most of the pipe is good, why are we gonna dig it all up and replace it? So that was something that kind of came up in discussion with our last project, 12th and 13th. When we were debating what needed to be done. So when we went and designed this project, we really took a lot of time to inspect those pipes. To say, hey, how bad are they? You know, where are we actually experiencing failure, and what can we do to fix that?
And you're only doing the inside, you're not doing the outside.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I would have liked this thing to be structured differently,
Well, wait a
But
minute,
it-
hold on. There.
but it,
Structuring you can't structure the whole thing differently. You can maybe make some modifications in certain areas, but there's the design plan. I mean, why did we even hire an engineering firm? What was that for? And what, I mean, we paid a lot of money to have this looked at, and this is what they came up with. Is there a possibility that there's a better solution or in this neighborhood? There may be. We don't know. However, all the work that's in that $4 million plan still needs to happen.
when I said structured differently, I meant the project, not the plan that is there. So I would have liked to have had that study to see what improvements could have been made. But as I
That's what
said, and I agree with you that.
And if we
But
can't,
we have the facts as they are, it didn't happen. So let's do it now, at least another study let's get the project done, because we still need the project. But let's see what else we can do as phase two, as any potential improvement.
Mr. Roberts.
Kyle will tell you that there were things done differently with this project as a result of the tasks that were done on 13th and 14th Street. There were improvements made
That's good to know.
and direction given to the engineering firm that are replicated on the construction plans. So there were improvements. I was kind of sitting in your seat when the 13th and 14th, 12th and 13th Street project came to be. So I asked a lot of questions at that time and didn't want that to go forward, but it did. And then we made changes after the fact on some of those things. I don't know the exact percentage, but Frank, if we took a look at the actual costing for this $4 million project, I'll run the numbers, but I'll bet you 95% of those costs have to do with the street improvements that would be needed to be done if we didn't have a stormwater pipe in the city. This is a typical maintenance project that every city in town does for the roads.
I have that understanding now, and that was mentioned at the council meeting, which frankly was somewhat disappointing in that such a huge percentage of the major project was just road improvement. But that's, again, that's the facts that we have, and we do have to do the road improvement. I understand also the argument that why go through all the road improvement if it's going to be washed away in 2 months, but again, where we are now is we need the curbs, we need the resurfaced roads. We need the pipes refurbished to whatever extent they need to be.
The ones.
We
that
need
require it.
to whatever
Say
extent they
30.
need to be, cleaned out. Because the drains can't work as efficiently as they might otherwise if they're filled with a bunch of gunk and goop, because I know what's going through the drain in front of my house. It's just all sorts of crud is running in there all the time. So I'm asking that we approve the project in the state that we have it now. Let's get it back on the agenda. Let's approve it. But let's agree to look at what kind of improvements there might be and also authorize that study.
This one that's in here.
Yes, or again, we can tweak this if people have other ideas, but it's a good proposal and it's a good place to start.
I will be more than happy to vote to approve the study. I saw the numbers, what was it, like 22,000?
And it's actually, as Kyle mentioned, can be a little bit less than that. And if you
Yeah.
want to address that.
Yeah, if you look at how the tasks are laid out, the task one is really where we need to be, which is going to be a lot of just the investigation and feasibility of this proposed project. If, it's proposed and the numbers seem like we're gonna get a good benefit for the cost it's gonna cause us, it's gonna cost the city, then we would move forward with task two and actually start the design.
Okay, so again, I would be willing to vote for this and approve it. However, you're gonna have to convince him to approve the $4 million project, and we'll just start on your neighborhood later. Because there's a possibility that it'll change. So we'll just go to somewhere else and start working on the streets on somewhere else, because I believe the project was supposed to start down here and go that way. But if there's a possibility of something changing, we uncover something that's going to benefit you. You don't like the design. It's down here that's impacted. This is where the flooding occurs. Go north, it's not like that. And you go north, it's not that way. And so I don't really believe that plan would change at all.
well, I have to agree with you 1000% here. Okay, because why rip up the street? when you might have to re-rip it.
Mhm.
Okay, you never want to put the shovel in twice.
And if the plan needs to be tweaked, or we need to go back and find out another way to finance a larger project in your neighborhood, well, then so be it. But we don't know what we don't know, and we've not had a study done that proves that anything will help this area of the community. But I think holding the rest of the city hostage while we try to work through this is a bad idea. And I've heard it from many people already. They're not happy.
We may find that based on certain assumptions on what happens with floods, that there is no solution. We may find that there's an easy one, and I just think we need that information. So I would ask that we approve a study and we approve the existing plan before we lose that pricing.
I agree. Yes.
Kyle, how much of the current project actually involves anything to the south, the bridge? Like the Cedar Street.
Just offhand, maybe like 25%,
How much?
25 to 30.
Okay, that much.
Yeah, because you got 9th Street, you got Harbor, and then you got Spruce, Palm, and
Right, all
Cedar.
these guys here. Okay,
Yeah, it's just a guess.
okay, fair enough.
And how long does it take if we vote to approve the project? What's the lead time for getting started on the project?
Oh, talking to the contractor, he starts right away. As soon as we get all the paperwork in order.
And how long does the project last?
We gave a whole year, but that was, factoring in bad weather, and it sounds like he'd want to get started right away, and he'd want to get it done before, we start getting the storms from hurricane season. So I imagine he'd be.
Is it possible to do the project in reverse? Start on the north end and work your way backwards?
A check with the engineer and talking to the contractor, because I don't think we'd have to request because I think the way the bid was laid out, we didn't specify that, so he'd have to be in agreement.
Okay.
There shouldn't be a problem.
And talking with him, he's very reasonable.
Change orders should
Seems
have a.
Seems
Let
like
me
he'd
make
work with
sure I
us.
understand that. What's the proposal? That we reverse the order of the repairs?
Go north to south instead of south to.
And the point of that is to do what?
In case they need to make a change, because you're wanting a study done of, are we doing it right?
I see. What is the timing on that? Anybody have any idea?
The study?
Or start in the middle and go back, but not all the way?
See,
The reason why I say that is that this is our primary street.
I understand. I do.
I feel that it's really at risk.
I agree.
But just so you understand, Kim, okay, if we do the plan the way it's presented to you, no study involved, you're gonna get the same results in a storm. What he's proposing is put your street on hold, okay, which isn't gonna result in no difference if a hurricane comes in or not. Start on the northern end, because that's all repaving, which I'm against that, but if I can get this thing moved, I'll do it. Because with 1 inch of blacktop, it's still gonna come up with cracks because there's no skin coat underneath.
I don't need a lesson on
Whatever.
how we're wasting our money.
Whatever, what I'm saying is, and then hopefully we come back, as MWI said, use 1 or 2 streets, start with 1 or 2 streets, see if it really works. See if you're happy. And then go forward.
See, I believe that the project will not be as different as you think it is. I think there will be an addition.
Yes.
There will be a well
Catch basin.
somewhere in one of the existing pipes. And the pump will go down in there and pump it out over the seawall as soon as the stormwater recedes below the edge of the seawall. I get it. I understand what you're looking for.
What we're trying to avoid is that if the construction company started here and did what they were gonna do, and then the study's completed and they say, well, here's the change. And that involves tearing up stuff that was already done.
Yeah,
That would be sad.
yeah,
You're gonna-
that was one of the
whole thing
questions
is
that we
you're gonna-
raised.
You're gonna rip up fresh blacktop.
Yeah.
One way or the other, if you have to.
And it would have to be a very carefully orchestrated set of events to happen because of timing. Because if the contractors come in and they say, we're knocking out this whole town in a month instead of a year, well, you've not had enough time to get your study done.
What,
And then you run into more costs because they have to stop what they're doing. And then you have, it would be, you'd have to redo the whole contract.
Can you live
what
with
was
that?
what was the timing of the original project as proposed?
9 months.
So for construction, we gave a year.
So the contractor
So-
gets a year. They could do it
It's gonna
sooner.
take
They
a long
want to do
time.
it sooner. Trust me. They don't want to take a year. They want to be done in a month.
Mr. Flutie, he's got task one here for 1 month. To get, that's probably 1 to 2 months, I'd say, to get through this first, investigation of everything, the utilities, the ground. And kind of draw up what his idea is.
Yeah, what I'm getting at is that if the construction project takes a year and we reverse the order and start north, then we probably have 6 to 9 months before we get to the decision point for what do we need to do here?
It's possible,
Yeah,
possible.
and okay,
But Kyle's gonna talk with the contractor, which is
Talk to
great.
the engineer,
Say,
talk
"Hey,
with the
what's your
contractor."
current logistical plan? Because they have one. As to where
Right.
they're gonna start.
and
because they didn't
hurricane
tell you.
season is gonna start
June 1st.
June 1st, so there's our 6 months, or a little less than that
There's
now,
been
but
hurricanes in May.
yeah.
Well, if you could get this study done before
It shouldn't
they
take very
started.
long, really. This shouldn't
No.
take long. This is.
I don't think it would, and let's talk about that study because as written, it relates to only one solution, right? Or do you read this as could be an assessment of any other solutions that might be there? We haven't talked about other things.
Well, I think when we've done all stormwater design, we've looked at everything always that could be done. This is specific to the pump. Because we need to investigate what it will take, what it's gonna cost and what it's gonna do.
In whose property it's gonna go on. And how easy it is to get easements, things like that.
And your street would probably go on the city property.
The pumped water you're talking about, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's talking about if we did the
Yeah.
whole northern end, we have to. probably-
Wouldn't do anything on the northern end.
I'm sorry, southern end.
Okay.
So do we have a deal?
Well, Dave, if you're sincere about this, I'll even vote on the game.
Okay. All right.
Now, what kind of negotiating was that?
Well, because I promised these citizens that we would get serious about getting rid of this water. I mean, and they-
I promise you, I will vote to get the study done, and if it's doable, I will vote for that also. All right,
We all would do that, of course. We all would do that.
okay. Any other discussion on item number 4? And thank you so much for
Yes.
putting that on the agenda.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks to all of you. I just felt like there's gotta be a way we all know we want to do this.
wanna
Let's
make
just
sure.
find out how. So thank you all.
Okay. Now we're on the general business. Do we have any, or is everyone ready to go home?
Just one thing.
Yes, sir.
I'm almost sure this is truthful, that our deputy rescued somebody a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. A kayak overturned.
Yes, I heard about that.
Some
Surf ski. I think it was a surf ski.
I wasn't sure.
I heard 70 something.
I heard he went in the water. Okay, I think we should give him some accommodation. Recognition.
Was there only one? Only one deputy that went in the water?
I heard,
I heard there were two.
I heard Deputy Robert Shaw and Chief Davidson, both involved.
I know Robert Shaw was, that's what I heard. I don't know.
That's great. Yeah, we should.
That's
Certificate.
very good news.
Nice certificate,
Yeah.
frame certificate or something like that. Would you find out?
Sure.
And, we'll get it on the agenda.
I heard you say something like if he was 70 something, are you implying that that's old or something?
No, it's just one of the details.
The the person that got rescued was 7?
He was in his 70s, and actually Deputy Robert Shaw knew him. He didn't know that until he got out there.
That's good.
Was he off by the
Yeah,
islands here or where was?
But that side on the Gulf.
Oh, really? And Robert Shaw swam out there and saved the guy?
So someone called dispatch and then he responded. And in that time, I think the fire chief overheard it too. Responded, so then they both went in.
Pretty cool.
And as soon as they got out there, he went, oh, it's only 2 feet deep.
Water. We determined the water was in the 50s.
Really? That's
Uh,
cool.
That's what I was saying.
I wouldn't be.
Wow.
A cold day too. I don't know why he was out there, but
Thanks for bringing that up. That we definitely need to recognize that.
Okay, well, if, to know what the general business then, just gonna say we're.
There we go.
Have a good evening.
Have a good night.
You
Yes,
too.
yes, yes, yes.